Ma'am, I'm going to have to freeze this account. The words dropped between them like polished glass. Fragile, gleaming, cruel. Alicia Grant blinked once. The marble floor reflected her shoes, her reflection sliced in half by the edge of the counter. She had come in with her morning calm intact, portfolio binder in one hand, phone in the other, smile polite but reserved. Behind the desk, Preston Hale, senior banker, mid-50s, the kind of man who still ironed his money before counting it, adjusted his tie with theatrical patience. "You understand," he said, lowering his voice to a register meant to sound professional. "We have protocols when we see irregularities, especially on an account of this size." Alicia set her binder down. "Irregularities?" He leaned closer, elbows creasing his tailored suit. "Multiple deposits, different sources, large transfers in short intervals. You can see why that might look suspicious to a compliance team." She met his gaze, calm. "They're payroll wires. Government contract disbursements. My team's project just finished clearance this quarter." Preston smiled the way people do when they're certain of their superiority. "Of course. But you'll appreciate that anyone can say that." The teller beside him pretended to check receipts, though her hands trembled faintly. Alicia's voice didn't rise. "And you'll appreciate that you just locked my access without asking a single verification question." He straightened. "Bank policy allows us discretion when activity appears fraudulent. We can release funds once proper identification and documentation are—" She slid her federal-issued badge across the counter. The laminate caught the light. U.S. Cyber Forensics Division, Department of Federal Investigations. Preston didn't look down. "We'll still need to run this through the fraud department. Fake credentials circulate everywhere these days." The entire lobby seemed to inhale. Alicia's patience held. "That's a government-issued badge, Mr. Hale. You can scan the QR code and verify it yourself." "I'm sure our system doesn't allow outside links," he said, already turning toward the glass office behind him. "I'll have to call upstairs." He disappeared through frosted doors, leaving her standing in the hush. The bank smelled of leather and disinfectant. Clients in suits glanced sideways, then looked away. On a nearby bench, a mother hushed her child. Alicia checked her phone. Account balance, frozen. Access restricted. Reason, flagged for suspicious federal activity, suspicious. She breathed once through her nose, slow, measured. The moment replayed in her head. The way Preston's smile curved when he said your kind of account. He hadn't even realized he'd said it aloud. When the door opened again, Preston re-entered with a new figure, Linda Morse. Branch manager, crisp navy blazer, tight bun, eyes that flicked between courtesy and control. "Ms. Grant," Linda began, "we understand your frustration. But until our fraud division confirms your identity, these funds remain inaccessible." "You mean until you confirm my identity," Alicia corrected. Linda's lips pressed into a polite line. "We're simply following procedure." What procedure allows freezing a federal employee's payroll account without calling the issuer first? That depends on whether we believe the employee is who she claims to be. A pause. Alicia exhaled softly. "You could verify that in 30 seconds. Preston folded his arms, enjoying the performance. "Ms. Grant, this isn't personal. But you have to understand, big transfers and sudden increases from government sources invite scrutiny. I'm sure you'd prefer we be thorough." Alicia studied him, noting the small tremor of ego in his tone. "I'd prefer you follow the law." From the other side of the lobby, a security guard hovered closer. Not threatening, just available. Preston noticed her glance and smiled again. "No need to worry. We maintain safety for everyone here. Everyone." Her phone buzzed. A message flashed from an encrypted channel. "Status, standby. Team en route." Ida Sevenman, she slipped the phone face down on the counter. "You mentioned your fraud department?" "Yes, call them," she said evenly. Linda frowned. "Excuse me? Call them." "Tell them you have a suspected federal fraud case in-house. They'll want to be present." Preston's confidence flickered. "That's not how our internal reviews—" Alicia's tone remained quiet. "Do it." He hesitated, then gestured to the teller. "Monica, patch through to fraud." While he waited, Alicia scanned the marble floor, the security cameras, mirrored ceiling domes, the red LED of the recording indicator. She counted 4 cameras, all operational. Good. The call connected on speaker. A distant voice answered, "Fraud Division, this is Reed." "Hi, Reed. This is Preston Hale from Main Street Branch," he said. "We've detained a customer under suspicion of synthetic identity." "Claims to be government personnel." "Copy that," said the voice. "What's the name?" "Alicia Grant." There was a pause long enough to chill the air. "Spell that?" He did. Another pause. Then, "Mr. Hale, can you confirm your location?" Preston glanced at Linda. "Yes. 241 Main Street, downtown." "Hold, please." Alicia folded her hands, waiting. Seconds later, the line crackled again. Different voice, crisp, authoritative. "This is Agent Reed, Fraud Task Lead, Federal Forensics. Mr. Hale, step away from the customer." Preston blinked. "Excuse me?" I said, "Step away. And do not terminate this call. Your branch is now under review for unlawful account seizure." Linda's face drained. "Who is this?" "Agent Reed," the voice repeated. "Department of Federal Investigations." Alicia almost smiled, but didn't. She watched them scramble silently, their hierarchy imploding. Preston stammered. "There must be a mistake. This woman came in with suspicious transfers." "She's my department head," said the voice. "And she's standing in front of you." The line went dead. Silence. Even the security guard stopped breathing for a second. Alicia picked up her badge from the counter, sliding it into her pocket. "Now," she said gently, "about releasing my funds." Linda tried to recover. "Mrs. Grant, perhaps we can—" The lobby doors whooshed open. 3 people entered. 2 men, 1 woman, all wearing windbreakers emblazoned in bold yellow, FBI, Cyber Crimes Unit. Every head in the lobby turned. Preston's voice cracked. "You called them?" Alicia's eyes didn't move from his. "No, they work for me." The agents approached the counter. One of them, Agent Mora, nodded at Alicia. "Ma'am," she inclined her head slightly. "Agent, thank you for the quick response." He turned to the bankers. "We have confirmation this branch attempted an unauthorized freeze on a federal contractor's account, pending bias and internal misconduct. We'll need to access your audit logs." Linda's lips parted soundlessly. Our what?" "Transaction logs. Calls, surveillance, everything after 9 a.m. Preston looked faint. "This is highly irregular." "Not for us," Mora said, flipping open a warrant. "You'll find our authority spelled out right here." The room seemed to tilt. Clients whispered. Someone pulled out a phone before a security guard hissed for them to stop recording. Alicia remained still, her voice quiet. "Mr. Hale, that's what irregular actually looks like." As agents dispersed through the branch, collecting hard drives and log-in data, Preston collapsed onto his chair, watching his own world unravel. "You should have just scanned the badge," Alicia said softly. He whispered, "I didn't know—" That was the point. 15 minutes later, the once sterile lobby looked like a crime scene in suits. Laptops open, paper trails spread across counters. The word investigation whispered through the air like dust. Agent Mora handed Alicia a small envelope. "Evidence chain initiated. Internal Affairs will follow up with their compliance office." She nodded. "Appreciate it." As she turned to leave, Preston called after her, voice shaking. "Ms. Grant, please." "I didn't mean—" She stopped by the door. "Intent doesn't erase damage, Mr. Hale, but policy will." Then she walked out into the daylight, calm, composed, unstoppable. Outside, sunlight flared off the glass facade, blindingly bright. Across the street, pedestrians slowed, watching the FBI jackets move inside the bank. Alicia checked her phone again. Account reinstated. Funds released. Note, apologies for inconvenience. She smiled faintly. "Inconvenience," she murmured. A siren wailed somewhere distant. She adjusted her blazer, crossed the street, and disappeared into the crowd. The next morning, the bank lobby smelled of citrus polish and denial. By 9 o'clock, every executive in Branch 241 had a copy of the incident summary sitting in their inbox. Subject, Customer Interaction Review, A. Grant, 1017. The opening line read like a lawyer's lullaby. A miscommunication occurred between staff and a visiting client, resulting in an unnecessary escalation later clarified with federal authorities. No mention of badges. No mention of the FBI. No mention of humiliation broadcast on half the phones in the lobby. Preston Hale reread the memo 3 times before forwarding it to his manager with a single line. For your records, resolved. The damage control begins in the conference room upstairs. Linda Morse paced between glass walls. Her reflection fractured across every panel like guilt itself. Public relations wants a unified statement, she said. We cannot confirm or deny federal involvement. Preston rubbed his temples. We can just call it a compliance misunderstanding. Words like fraud, freeze, or detained are off limits, Linda warned. We're using temporary review. Understood? Someone coughed. Behind them, on the giant screen, security footage played silently. Alicia's calm figure standing at the counter, Preston leaning forward, the badge glinting. Then, the moment the doors opened, and the yellow FBI lettering entered frame. Preston couldn't watch. Can we mute that? It's already muted, Linda said. Corporate spin by 10 Dagouts a.m. Headquarters had sent its own version of the truth to all regional branches. An internal systems audit temporarily restricted a government-affiliated account. The matter was promptly resolved through standard procedure. We reaffirm our commitment to compliance and customer trust. That line, customer trust, made Preston laugh under his breath. The kind of brittle laugh that breaks if you inhale wrong. He opened his email. 40 unread messages. Subject lines glared: media inquiry, staff behavior, federal presence at branch 241. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it. When it rang again, Linda hissed. If that's the press, do not speak. Send everything to corporate legal. He nodded but didn't answer. The screen kept flashing. Private call. Federal Internal Affairs. The leaked video at noon. The silence cracked. A 60-second clip surfaced on social media. Blurry, shaky, but clear enough to see the FBI windbreakers, clear enough to hear the end of Alicia's sentence. That's what irregular actually looks like. It spread faster than policy memos. By lunchtime, the Frozen by Bias trended PR released another statement. We value diversity and take claims of miscommunication seriously. The word miscommunication appeared 6 times in one paragraph. Inside Alicia's world, while the bank scrambled, Alicia sat in a cafe across the street, laptop open, earbuds in, reviewing network logs from the previous day. Her team's encrypted system had captured every second of her exchange inside the branch. Audio, metadata, timestamps. She wasn't angry. She was methodical. Each clip labeled Cam 02 Lobby Main, Cam 04 Counterview, Bodycam Agent Mora at 12:14 p.m. She added them to a secure evidence chain and uploaded a summary report titled Improper Financial Seizure, Preliminary Findings. No hashtags. No press release. Just facts. Then she closed her laptop and sipped her coffee. Across the street, she could see Preston through the glass, gesturing wildly in the conference room, the choreography of panic. The meeting that wasn't about her at 1:30 p.m. Regional Director Margaret Duval joined by video call. Her tone could cut granite. Do you have any idea how this looks? Linda tried to sound composed. Ma'am, we're cooperating fully. The customer was never formally detained. Spare me semantics, Duval interrupted. The Justice Department called me. They used the phrase civil rights violation. Does that ring a bell? Preston's throat went dry. He had never heard those words spoken in his direction before. Duval continued. I want every internal email and footage preserved. No deletions. Our legal team will handle discovery. Linda hesitated. Discovery? That's for litigation. Exactly, Duval said, and ended the call. The blame shift by evening, the first sacrificial draft was ready. HR compiled a timeline that subtly rewrote history. AM, customer enters branch, tout 6. AM, system flags unusual activity. Oh, I'm a staff act per training to verify. Identity. 7:17 a.m. Federal agents arrive. Unannounced at 23 a.m. Situation resolved amicably. See? Linda said, handing Preston a copy. We followed procedure. No mention of bias, no mention of freeze orders without authorization. He read it, nodded slowly. Who takes the fall? She met his eyes. Probably you. At 7:42 p.m., Alicia's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time she answered, Miss Grant, this is Eleanor Parks, Federal Ethics Oversight. We received your incident upload. May we confirm your authorization to open a civil review? Yes, thank you. We'll coordinate with Internal Affairs and your agency's legal division. Expect contact within 48 hours. Alicia glanced out the window. Across the street, bank lights were still on. Make it 24, she said. Thursday morning, an email landed in every employee's inbox. Mandatory meeting, Branch 241 review, confidential. The agenda line read, Reputation Protection Measures. Linda opened the meeting with false cheer. We're not villains here, she said. We just need to remind our community that we're human beings. Preston thought of Alicia Grant standing tall amid his doubt and knew that wasn't true. Outside the meeting room, two men in plain suits stood by the reception desk. FBI Internal Affairs. They didn't need badges this time. Everyone recognized them by how the air changed when they walked in. By afternoon, emails leaked again. Not videos this time, but correspondence. Lines of policy doctors editing words like bias into system review. Someone had leaked the drafts to a journalist. Alicia didn't have to say a thing. The truth was doing her work for her. That evening, he sat alone at his desk as the screensaver bounced across the monitor. He typed a message to Alicia's agency email, Ms. Grant. I'd like to apologize. We misinterpreted the situation. It was never personal. He hovered over send, then deleted the last sentence. It was personal. It always had been. At 8:03 p.m., his phone rang. Caller ID, Federal Compliance Bureau. He answered with a voice that was no longer steady. Mr. Hale, the agent said, we're reviewing recordings from your branch. We need your statement first thing tomorrow. You are to refrain from altering any documents or correspondence. Understand? Yes, sir, Preston whispered. He set the phone down and stared at his reflection in the black glass of his monitor until the screen went dark. Alicia's evening across town, Alicia closed another file. Her screen glowed soft blue in the dark room. Her colleague texted, They're already rewriting the reports, she replied. Let them. We write the receipts. The next morning would not belong to the bank anymore. Their lies were documented, their emails preserved, and their miscommunication about to become a federal case study in bias. Alicia watched the sun rise over the city skyline and murmured to herself, Let's see how they spin this with evidence. The first thing Alicia did when she woke up wasn't check the news. It was check the data. Her laptop glowed in the early morning light of her apartment, soft jazz humming in the background. The case folder labeled Bank 241 on Incident Chain was already filling with files. Call logs, security footage timestamps, internal memos pulled through subpoena access. Each piece was a thread. Together, they would form the rope. The FBI moves. Quietly, by 8 a.m., the same branch that had frozen her account was surrounded, not by sirens, but by silence. A pair of unmarked black SUVs parked across the street. Agents in casual clothes entered one by one, badges tucked, eyes scanning. This wasn't a raid. It was an audit. Inside, Preston Hale was pretending to drink coffee. His hands shook so badly the lid rattled against the paper cup. The branch smelled of nervous perfume and copy toner. Linda whispered, They said it's routine. Preston looked at her. Routine doesn't show up with subpoenas. At the reception desk, an agent signed the visitor log. Read, Federal Oversight Division. He smiled politely. We're here for some data verification. Shouldn't take long. Every employee knew it would take days. Alicia's command center in her office at the Cyber Division, Alicia watched the same building through a live satellite feed. Agent Mora's voice came through her earpiece. We're in. Pulling local server access now. Copy, she replied. Preserve first, parse later. I want clean hashes on all email servers before noon. A junior tech analyst looked up from his monitor. Ma'am, the internal memos match the pattern from last year's Wells probe. Word replacements. Identical phrasing. Show me, Alicia said. He pulled up 2 documents side by side. Left, Bank 241. Summary, A grant. Right, case file. 19174, Federal Complaint 2022, same sentence structure. Same deflection. Same ghostwriter. Corporate legal recycled a defense memo, she murmured. They've done this before. The narrative cracks meanwhile, inside the bank's upper floors. The PR team was melting under fluorescent lights. A woman from corporate communications read from a prepared script. We'll emphasize that this was an isolated event. No systemic issue, an agent interrupted gently. Then why is the same language used in 12 previous compliance violations? No one answered. The silence was worse than guilt. Evidence compilation by midday. Alicia's team had built a digital mosaic, surveillance logs, confirmed the freeze occurred after ID verification, not before. Audio capture, Preston's voice using racialized undertones. Your kind of account. Internal email thread. Subject line. Flag her activity ASAP. Sent 6 minutes before the freeze. Deleted draft. Linda. Morse typing and deleting the phrase didn't look legit. Alicia leaned back in her chair. They didn't just break procedure, she said. They built a culture around it. The interrogation at 2:40 p.m., Preston was led into the conference room, now transformed into an interrogation suite. No cuffs, just questions. Agent Reed smiled pleasantly. We just want clarity, Mr. Hale, simple questions. Honest answers, Preston swallowed. Of course. Why did you freeze Ms. Grant's account? It was flagged by our fraud system. Which one? He hesitated. I believe it was the adaptive algorithm. Reed raised an eyebrow. The algorithm your bank discontinued 6 months ago? The room went quiet. Reed flipped open a file. Our forensic logs show the freeze was manual. You entered the command yourself. Preston's jaw moved, but no sound came out. Reed leaned forward, tone soft. You see, Mr. Hale, algorithms don't say things like your kind of account. People do. Internal leaks back at headquarters, journalists were circling like vultures over a carcass. A leak from an unnamed insider confirmed racially motivated language and unauthorized freeze operations. The story hit national outlets before sunset. Federal agent's account frozen by bank, now a civil rights probe, comments flooded in by the thousands. Some disbelieving. Most furious. Linda breaks at 5:30 p.m. Linda sat in her car in the underground garage, engine off, phone trembling in her hand. She'd received a message marked confidential, urgent from corporate legal. Do not destroy evidence. Federal chain of custody in effect. You are named in the investigation. She exhaled shakily. Her reflection in the windshield looked older than she remembered. She replayed Alicia's calm voice in her mind. You could verify that in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. That's all it would have taken to check the badge. She started the engine and whispered, God forgive me. Alicia's calm in the Federal Command Office. Alicia's colleagues watched the chaos unfold on split screens, news feeds, server logs, agent reports. One of them asked, Ma'am, how do you stay so composed? Alicia didn't look up from her screen. Because they still think this is about me, he frowned. It's not. She turned, eyes steady. It's about everyone they've done this to who couldn't walk in with a badge. Data doesn't lie. The forensic audit grew teeth. Between 2019 and 2024, the branch had frozen 328 accounts under irregular activity. Of those, 247 belonged to clients of color. Only 19 were ever confirmed as legitimate fraud. Alicia printed the summary, black ink on white paper. Every number a quiet accusation. Pattern established, Agent Mora said. Pattern proven, she corrected. Now we build precedent. Preston's desperation. By the next morning, Preston was begging for a transfer. He'd been suspended, stripped of access, and escorted from his office. His world had shrunk to a single chair in HR's waiting room. The same hands that froze accounts now held a termination packet. He stared at the papers. It wasn't personal, he muttered again, but even he didn't believe it. The court of public opinion, outside, reporters waited in the rain. One of them caught Alicia leaving the federal building. "Miss Grant, is it true you were the victim of discrimination?" She paused, looked into the camera. "No," she said softly. "I was the evidence." The clip aired nationwide that evening. It wasn't fiery. It wasn't emotional. It was surgical. The turning point at 9 p.m. Alicia's phone lit up with a notification. Court authorization. Grand jury consideration approved. The message beneath read, "You're cleared to proceed." She set the phone down gently beside her badge. Outside her window, the city lights blurred like distant embers. Tomorrow, she wouldn't be walking into a bank. She'd be walking into history. The federal hearing room wasn't built for spectacle, but that morning it felt like a stage, muted walls. Polished oak, a single seal above the dais, United States Department of Justice, rows of seats filled with reporters, bank attorneys, and corporate witnesses who suddenly discovered religion in silence. Cameras weren't allowed, but every word spoken here would echo far beyond these walls. At the center table sat Alicia Grant, her posture perfectly still. Her black suit was simple, unembellished, the same one she wore for field hearings, efficient, silent, lethal. A digital tablet glowed in front of her, linked to an encrypted evidence hub. Across from her, Preston Hale and Linda Morse sat under the sterile lights, both pale in ways that went deeper than exhaustion. The federal hearing officer, Judge Anita Rhodes, tapped her pen against the stack of binders before her. "This hearing concerns allegations of unlawful financial discrimination, evidence tampering, and false reporting in violation of Federal Compliance Code 13-21C. All participants are reminded that this proceeding is under oath. Ms. Grant, you may begin." Alicia stood slowly, voice even. "Thank you, Your Honor. Before we start, I'd like to clarify something for the record." Rhodes nodded. "Go ahead." "When I walked into Bank 241 on October 17th, I was not there as an agent of any federal division. I was there as a private citizen accessing my personal payroll account. I had no intention of initiating an investigation. The investigation began the moment they decided I didn't look like my credentials." A whisper moved through the room, the kind that travels like wind across dry grass. Alicia continued. "This isn't a story about one bank employee making a bad judgment call. It's about a culture of assumption, sanctioned by procedure, weaponized by policy." Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. Each word hit clean like a gavel. Preston's defense. Preston's attorney stood. "Objection, Your Honor. My client has expressed regret. This was a misunderstanding." Rhodes cut him off. "You'll have the opportunity to respond. Sit down." Alicia swiped her tablet. The screen on the courtroom display lit up with a time-stamped feed. 09:07:42. Bank 241, lobby video began to play. There was Preston, stiff in his suit, leaning forward across the counter. The camera caught everything: the smirk, the tilt of power, the sentence that would haunt his career. "We'll still need to run this through the fraud department. Fake credentials circulate everywhere these days." And then Alicia's calm response. "That's a government-issued badge. You can verify it yourself." The pause. The scoff. The quiet satisfaction of a man who thought the world would always side with him. The room shifts. When the clip ended, Alicia turned back toward the bench. "Your Honor, that statement wasn't made in isolation. It was made in an environment where employees were trained, explicitly, to associate irregular accounts with certain profiles." She tapped again. A new exhibit appeared. An internal memo, company letterhead visible, dated 8 months before the incident. Flag accounts exhibiting non-standard deposits, especially those from federal or minority-owned contractors. Murmurs erupted behind her. A journalist dropped his pen. Rhodes leaned forward. "This document is authentic?" Alicia nodded. "Verified metadata. Pulled from the bank's own servers by forensic subpoena." Linda Morse visibly sagged in her chair. The manager speaks. When called to the stand, Linda avoided Alicia's gaze. Her voice trembled. Yes, the memo was distributed to senior staff. We were told it was about compliance risk management. Did you believe that? Alicia asked. Linda hesitated. At first, and later. A pause long enough to feel like a confession. Later, it felt like something else. What changed? Linda's eyes flicked to Preston, then back. The language. The meetings. The way we were told to trust our instincts when deciding which accounts to freeze. Alicia's tone sharpened. Whose instincts? Linda swallowed hard. People like Mr. Hale's. Preston crumbles. When it was Preston's turn, he still tried to smile. Look, I made a mistake. I acted out of caution. Alicia's calm expression didn't move. Caution? You froze a federal account, refused ID verification, and summoned security without confirming a single field on your terminal. He licked his lips. I thought I was protecting the bank. From what? A woman in a blazer with a badge? He looked down. From liability. Mr. Hale, do you know what real liability looks like? He said nothing. Alicia held up a printed photo. A still frame from security footage. Preston's face inches from hers. The exact moment he said, fake credentials circulate everywhere these days. She placed it on the evidence table. That's liability. The pattern exposed, Alicia stepped back to the display and pulled up another file, a spreadsheet so large it filled the entire projection wall. Rows of account IDs, names, races, dates, and freeze durations. Over a 5-year period, she said, Bank 241 froze 328 accounts under discretionary review. 89% of those accounts belonged to people of color. Less than 7% were ever linked to legitimate fraud. Preston's attorney muttered, Those demographics reflect our customer base. Alicia didn't even look at him. The branch's own census data shows only 32% of its clientele are people of color. Would you like me to show that slide too? The lawyer sat down without answering. Judge Rhodes folded her hands. Continue. The emails, the next set of exhibits, wasn't visual. It was written. Alicia read aloud from an internal email chain titled, Flag high-risk accounts. Subject shows non-traditional income. Probable red flag. Proceed with freeze until escalation. Another, dated 2 days before her own incident. Unverified government transfers. Same profile as last week. Could be fraud. She looked up. The same profile? That was me. The moment of truth, Judge Rhodes leaned back. Ms. Grant, what is your position within the federal system again? Alicia's voice was calm, unflinching. I head the Department of Cyber Forensic Analytics. My office cross-references financial discrimination data with digital fraud algorithms. Essentially, I build the systems they pretend to understand. A ripple moved through the room. Disbelief. Awe, respect, she continued. So when I tell you these freezes weren't accidental, I say it as the person who helped write the audit software that proves it. The collapse Linda Morse broke first. She started to cry quietly, shaking her head. I told him to just scan the badge, she whispered. I told him to. He said he knew a fake when he saw one. Preston's attorney leaned in. We'd like to... Rhodes silenced him with a raised hand. Save it for closing. Public reckoning? Outside, the story had already escaped the courtroom. Someone leaked the hearing transcript within an hour. Headlines exploded across every major outlet. FBI agent humiliated by bank. Now she's leading the case against them. I was the evidence, says Alicia Grant, testifying before federal court. The bank's stock price dropped 8% by noon. Inside the courtroom, Alicia remained poised. Every piece of evidence had a rhythm, like she'd choreographed the collapse of an empire to music only she could hear. The turn Judge Rhodes called a recess. When the room emptied, Linda approached Alicia quietly. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean for any of this. Alicia studied her. You didn't stop it either. Linda nodded, eyes wet. What happens to him? Alicia's answer was quiet. The same thing that happens to every system that mistakes bias for protocol. It fails. The revelation when court resumed, Alicia requested one final exhibit. She projected an internal compliance presentation from 2023, the bank's own diversity training slide deck. On one slide, a slogan read, Integrity is our identity. Alicia faced the room. They printed this slogan on posters, not policies. On screensavers, not systems. That's how institutions hide behind words. She turned off the screen. But when data speaks, words collapse. The verdict in Motion Judge Rhodes tapped her pen once. I've seen enough. The room stilled. Pending formal ruling, the Department of Justice recommends immediate suspension of Bank 241's compliance license and referral for criminal review under federal discrimination statutes. Preston exhaled like a man, watching his own life dissolve in front of him. Linda covered her face. Alicia simply nodded. Aftermath, as the session adjourned, a young journalist caught up to her in the hallway. "Ms. Grant, can I ask what justice looks like to you right now?" She paused, looked straight into the camera. "Justice," she said, "isn't revenge. It's recognition. It's the moment the world finally admits what you already knew." She walked past the microphones, down the marble hall lined with flags, her reflection stretching taller with every step. The hearing had ended, but the investigation was only beginning. Within 48 hours, the Department of Justice issued a notice titled Preliminary Findings on Systemic Financial Discrimination, Bank 241 and Affiliates. The title alone sent shockwaves through Wall Street. But the document inside was even worse. It listed 142 branches, 12 years of operational data, and one word repeated more than any other: disparity. The numbers start talking. Alicia sat in her office surrounded by paper, not the kind that bought power, but the kind that proved it was misused. She had requested access to the National Banking Oversight Archives, cross-referencing complaint filings with enforcement outcomes, her screen filled with patterns that could no longer hide behind jargon. 246 official complaints of unexplained account freezes. 73% of affected customers identified as minorities. 0.8% resulted in disciplinary action, 57.4 million in quiet settlements over the past decade. For everyone, Alicia, there were hundreds of others, teachers, veterans, small business owners, who never got their instant karma moment. She whispered to herself, "They thought bias was a policy tool." Inside the network agent, Mora entered, dropping a folder labeled Interbank Correspondence, redacted. "Your hunch was right," he said. "It wasn't just one branch." The same language popped up in 4 regional banks. He flipped the pages. Identical phrasing in compliance memos across multiple institutions. Heightened fraud risk associated with unconventional income streams. Flag profiles exhibiting cash inflows inconsistent with demographic averages. Alicia read the second line twice. "Demographic averages," she repeated. "They turned identity into an algorithmic threshold." Mora nodded grimly. "We're talking systemic design, not human error. The media frenzy by Friday." The headlines had evolved from curiosity to outrage. Fraud filter or racial filter? DOJ probes banking algorithm bias. $2 billion in frozen assets under federal scrutiny. Cable anchors debated whether it was incompetence or intent. But the data was merciless. It didn't care about opinions. On her screen, Alicia scrolled through the next layer of evidence. Internal chat transcripts obtained via subpoena. Compliance Analyst 3. "This one's another flagged account. Name looks foreign. Auto freeze? Manager: Yep. Don't get burned again. Better safe than sorry." Compliance Analyst 3. "Got it. A profile match." She printed that page and underlined it in red. Profile match. They had gamified discrimination behind corporate doors. Meanwhile, in a skyscraper 50 miles away, a closed-door meeting turned ugly. The CEO of Bank 241's parent corporation slammed his fist on the table. "How many zeros are we bleeding here?" his general counsel answered quietly. "If this goes class action, we're estimating between 6 and 800 million in damages. Minimum." The CEO's face tightened. "And the agent, Grant, she's pushing this?" "She's not pushing," the counsel replied. "She's proving." The quiet heroes at the federal office, Alicia's small team had grown into a full task force. Analysts, lawyers, data scientists, each of them working 14-hour days. They weren't chasing headlines. They were chasing truth through terabytes of deceit. A young analyst named Sosa approached her desk. "Ma'am, I found something strange," he said. "A cross-reference in their training database. Some of the account risk flags are literally tagged with zip codes, not transactions." Showed her the list, codes from predominantly black and immigrant neighborhoods. Alicia stared at the screen, silent for a moment. "Redlining. Reinvented," she said. "They digitized the same sin." The dollar cost of discrimination. By week's end, a federal financial summary circulated across departments. The findings were staggering: $486 million in unjustified account holds between 2019-2024, $91 million in lost interest and transaction revenue to affected customers, $2.3 billion estimated national economic loss from trust erosion. Alicia printed the final page. It contained a single line of bureaucratic poetry. "Discrimination is expensive, not because justice costs money, but because injustice does." She pinned it above her desk. Back at the bank, Preston Hale was now a ghost haunting his own headlines. No title, no desk, no badge access. Reporters camped outside his apartment. His lawyer told him to stay silent, but the noise of his own conscience was louder than the news cycle. He finally gave one interview to a local station. "I didn't hate her," he said softly. "I just didn't see her." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said. The hidden layer. The DOJ's tech division found something else buried deep, a shared vendor providing fraud detection software to multiple banks. Its algorithm documentation referenced an anomaly matrix trained on legacy banking data sets, 1990-2010. Translation: it learned discrimination from history, and nobody ever reprogrammed it. Alicia stared at the code sample on her screen. "This isn't a glitch," she murmured. "This is inherited bias running on autopilot." She ordered a full data recall. The hearing before Congress. 2 weeks later, she was called to testify before the Senate Banking Committee. The chamber was packed, cameras rolling, murmurs rippling through the crowd. A senator leaned forward. "Ms. Grant, in plain English, what exactly did they do?" Alicia adjusted her mic. "They used data to profile trust, and they defined trust by color." The senator's pen froze. "And how do you know this?" She held up a single page. "Because I built the model that proves it. Public reckoning within days. Regulators announced an emergency nationwide review of algorithmic compliance tools. 6 major banks were flagged for investigation. 2 CEOs resigned preemptively." But Alicia didn't celebrate. She sat in her office late one night, staring at an old black-and-white photograph of her grandmother, a woman who had been denied a home loan in 1972 because her neighborhood was too risky. Same story, different century. Alicia whispered, "We just changed the interface, the whistleblowers." The following week, 3 anonymous employees from rival banks came forward. One of them sent a flash drive directly to Alicia's office with a note. "They told us to mark anything that looked irregular." Turns out, irregular just meant unfamiliar. The drive contained internal training videos instructing staff to rely on profile instinct when systems flagged uncertain activity. In one clip, a supervisor literally said, "If you wouldn't trust them with your car keys, don't trust them with 6 figures." The hypocrisy was cinematic, prejudice disguised as protocol. The breaking point late one evening, Alicia's screen blinked with a new notification. Incoming message. Congressional Oversight Office. "Ms. Grant, your testimony has initiated formal recommendations for the Federal Fair Access Act, expanding protections against algorithmic discrimination in finance." The bill was real. The change had begun. A quiet conversation agent Mora stopped by her office door. "You realize, don't you? You just rewrote federal banking history." Alicia smiled faintly. "I didn't rewrite it. I just forced them to read the fine print." Meanwhile, on the street in the neighborhoods once labeled high risk, small business owners were finally seeing progress. Frozen accounts reopened. Letters of apology arrived, thin paper carrying heavy words. One local news report showed a barber in Atlanta holding his reopened account statement with tears in his eyes. "They said my deposits were irregular," he told the camera. "Turns out, regular folks just needed the right hero." The numbers closed the case. By the time the DOJ published its final summary, the scale was undeniable. Her institutions implicated benign executives under review, 17 criminal referrals, 8 billion in settlements and oversight orders. Alicia read the closing paragraph quietly. In the absence of vigilance, systems replicate the very biases they were built to eliminate. Accountability is not optional. It is structural. She closed the folder, exhaled slowly, and looked at the city lights below. This wasn't just her victory. It was a generational correction. Foreshadow of the showdown. The final memo on her desk wasn't from the DOJ, it was from the White House. "Director Grant, you are requested to oversee the new Federal Equity Compliance Bureau." A promotion, a new war. She smiled, a calm, tired, knowing smile. Justice had momentum now, and she was going to keep it moving. The sun hit the mirrored facade of Bank 241's headquarters like judgment made visible. By 9 a.m., black SUVs lined the curb. Agents moved with silent precision. Inside, the air was antiseptic and afraid. In Conference Room A, the same room where they once practiced their lies, a federal SEAL now stood on a collapsible podium. Camera crews, attorneys, and auditors filled every seat. At the far end of the table sat Alicia Grant, posture straight, eyes calm. Across from her, CEO Richard Latham, Chief Counsel Evelyn Krause, and the broken ghost of Preston Hale. Judge Rhodes presided again, this time not as a hearing officer, but as the official arbiter of sanction enforcement. "This meeting," she said, "is for record. No spin, no speculation. We are here to deliver accountability." The sentence dropped like a closing door. The executives try one last time. Latham's lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, our client wishes to emphasize his cooperation and continued commitment to reform." Alicia interrupted, gently but firmly. Commitment to reform began after the subpoenas. She tapped her tablet. The screen behind her filled with numbers. Settlement totals, complaint ratios, documented violations. "Your bank froze over $300 million in civilian accounts without cause," she said. 82% of those belonged to clients who shared one statistical commonality: skin tone. The lawyer tried to object, but Judge Rhodes simply raised a finger. "Let her finish." Alicia advanced the slide. Internal emails, dated March 12, 2023. "These demographic accounts carry higher audit risk. Prioritize fraud flagging for efficiency." The room's oxygen thinned. Preston's reckoning, when? Preston was called forward. He moved like gravity itself had doubled. He no longer wore a suit. Just a plain gray jacket, the color of penance. "A year ago," Alicia began, "you said you acted out of caution." He nodded weakly. "Yes, ma'am. Do you now understand what that caution cost?" His voice cracked. "Everything." She leaned forward. "Not your everything. Theirs. The families whose accounts you froze before rent was due. The student loans that defaulted because a fraud review lasted 3 months. The retired veteran who died waiting for a transfer you personally blocked." Preston's eyes filled. "I thought I was following protocol." Alicia's tone softened, almost kind. "Protocol is not a shield for injustice. It's a mirror. It shows who we are when no one can argue back." The sentence of institutions Judge Rhodes turned to the executives. Effective immediately, Bank 241's federal charter is suspended pending relicensing under oversight. All executive bonuses from 2020 to 2024 will be subject to clawback under the Whitley Reform Act. Gasps rippled through the room. Alicia remained still, but her eyes flicked to Preston, not with vengeance, but with truth acknowledged. Rhodes continued. Mr. Hale, you are hereby banned from employment in any federally insured financial institution for life. Civil rights violations remain under criminal review, Preston whispered. Understood. The public broadcast across the country, live news feeds carried the official statement. Alicia approached the microphone, flanked by Rhodes and Mora. The flashbulbs painted her in strobe light, each blink capturing a face carved by restraint. Not revenge, today, she said, is not about punishing a bank. It's about protecting the idea that access is a right, not a favor. She paused. They called it fraud. We called it Friday because it happened every week to someone who looked like me. No more. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in collective exhale. Consequences ripple out within days. Regulators froze bonuses across the sector. Boards convened emergency ethics sessions. The Federal Reserve announced a new division, Office of Equitable Banking Practices, headed by Alicia Grant. She refused the ceremonial press tour. Instead, she flew quietly to Detroit, where community leaders waited with folders of real stories, small businesses choked by suspicious activity flags. I don't want a headline, she told them. I want a blueprint. Meanwhile, at the bank, the building's once shiny logo was being unbolted by maintenance crews. Reporters called it the day the marble cracked. Inside, Linda Morse handed her resignation letter to the interim director. No one tried to stop her. She walked out with a single folder under her arm, copies of training memos she planned to hand to Alicia directly. For the first time in her career, she wanted to tell the truth without getting paid for it. Face to face. A week later, they met in a small federal office. No press, no lawyers. Linda stood nervously. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. I just want to help clean up what I helped create. Alicia nodded. Then start by writing down every directive that made you hesitate. That's where policy turns into prejudice. Linda smiled sadly. You're not what I expected. I rarely am, Alicia replied. The final press conference, when the Department of Justice released its findings to the public, Alicia stood behind the podium once more. A reporter asked, Agent Grant, what message would you send to anyone who still thinks they can get away with this? She answered quietly, check the timestamp. Every system keeps a record. The room fell silent, a new kind of respect settling in where fear used to live. The weight of justice. That night, Alicia returned to her apartment and finally let herself breathe. She set her badge on the table, beside the faded photo of her grandmother. Outside, the city hummed like a machine finally calibrated right. Justice didn't look like vengeance. It looked like quiet correction, a system rewiring itself from the inside out. For the first time in months, the lobby of Bank 241 was silent. No customers arguing over overdrafts. No phones ringing. No whispers about the incident. Just silence, the kind that follows a storm too big to name. Alicia walked through the glass doors wearing no badge this time. No agents, no cameras, just her. The same sunlight that once glared judgment across her face now pooled warm against her shoulders. The marble floor still bore faint scuff marks from where FBI agents had stood. The same receptionist, a woman named Claire, froze when she saw her. Ms. Grant, she stammered. Alicia smiled gently. I'm not here for revenge. Claire's eyes softened. Then why come back? Alicia looked around the hollow lobby. Because healing starts where the wound began. The apology inside the new management suite, interim director Michael Suarez, rose as she entered. He was younger than the rest, clean record, steady eyes. Agent Grant, he said, we've been expecting you. She shook her head. Just Alicia today, he nodded, motioning for her to sit. I wanted you to hear it from me. The board has approved restitution payments for every client affected by the biased freezes, plus interest. He slid a folder across the desk. 247 accounts. $23.8 million in total. Letters go out next week. Alicia opened the folder. The list of names wasn't just numbers. She recognized one, Etta Lawson, 72, retired nurse. Her account had been frozen for unverified medical payments. She passed away waiting for access, Alicia said quietly. Suarez lowered his eyes. Her daughter will receive full compensation. Alicia closed the file. That's a start. Lives restored. The next morning, news outlets didn't talk about the scandal. They talked about the recovery. A montage of faces filled TV screens. A single mother smiling through tears as she reopened her business account. A veteran checking his reactivated pension. A community center holding up a printed email titled, "Account Restored." The world saw what repair looked like. For Alicia, it was never about headlines. It was about proof that justice could move quietly and still shake nations. The call from D.C. Her phone rang just past noon. The caller ID read White House Office of Economic Policy. Alicia Grant? Yes. This is Deputy Secretary Ramirez. The President's Economic Council is forming a special advisory panel. We'd like you to chair it. What kind of panel? Algorithmic accountability in finance. You've exposed a pattern we can't ignore. We want it dismantled at the root. She paused, fingers resting on her coffee mug. Then let's start with how systems define risk, she said. And who gets to define it? Back in the neighborhood, a week later, Alicia returned to the neighborhood where she'd grown up. Small brick houses, porches lined with folding chairs, the smell of barbecue in the air. The same community that once feared banks now had federal outreach vans parked at the curb, helping locals reopen accounts. Her childhood friend Renee waved from across the street. You made the suits flinch, girl. Alicia laughed. I just made them look in the mirror. Renee pointed toward a nearby store, Grant's Grocery, reopened after being shut down by compliance delays. Her father had run it for 30 years. Inside, the new clerk, a teenage girl with braids, smiled as Alicia walked in. You're her daughter, right? Alicia nodded. My mom said you're the reason her credit card works again, the girl said. Thank you. Alicia smiled softly. Just doing my part. The rebuilding at the federal building downtown. Alicia's new task force gathered for the first time under a new sign, Federal Equity Compliance Bureau. The room was filled with analysts, lawyers, engineers, all handpicked for one reason: integrity. She opened the meeting with calm authority. This isn't about catching bad apples, she said. It's about redesigning the orchard. Agent Mora leaned back, smiling faintly. You're turning justice into architecture, Alicia replied. Exactly. Because fairness shouldn't need an investigation. It should be built in. The public ceremony. When the first annual report was published, Congress invited Alicia to speak on national television. The chamber was full, cameras rolling, senators lined like stone statues. She approached the podium. 6 months ago, she began, a single transaction exposed a systemic truth. We called it fraud detection, but what we were detecting was difference. Murmurs echoed across the room. Justice isn't only about punishment, she continued. It's about recalibration, restoring balance where it was quietly tilted for generations. Applause rose, not thunderous, but sincere, like rain after drought, the one conversation that mattered most after the ceremony. Alicia walked outside into the soft dusk. Waiting near the steps was Preston Hale, thinner now, eyes aged by truth. He approached cautiously. Agent Grant, Ms. Grant. She studied him for a long moment. You shouldn't be here, I know, he said. But I wanted to thank you. For what? For not destroying me. Alicia folded her arms. I didn't need to. You did that yourself, he nodded slowly. I know, but you also showed me something. Systems don't break overnight. They erode, decision by decision. I was one of those decisions. She looked past him at the horizon. Then make better ones. That's the only apology that matters. He nodded and left quietly. No guards, no reporters, no vengeance. Just closure. Legacy in motion. 3 months later, the Fair Access Act passed through both chambers of Congress. For the first time in U.S. history, algorithmic discrimination carried the same penalties as human bias. The bill was nicknamed informally by journalists the Grant Law. Alicia didn't attend the signing. She was already in another city, meeting with small credit unions to help implement the reforms. She didn't want her name on legislation. She wanted her fingerprints on change. The restored balance late one night, she sat on her apartment balcony overlooking the city skyline. The hum of traffic below sounded different now, less like chaos, more like continuity. On the table beside her lay an envelope marked Final Report, Case Closed. Inside, a single-page summary. All affected accounts restored. Civil settlements completed. Institutional oversight ongoing. She folded it neatly and placed it beside her grandmother's photograph. For the first time, she allowed herself to smile. Not victory, but peace. The dignity principle before turning in. She opened her journal and wrote a single line across the page. Dignity should never need permission. Then she underlined it twice. It wasn't just a closing thought. It was a creed, the quiet principle that would outlive her, outlast laws, outshine every marble tower built on the myth of fairness. 6 months later, the skyline looked the same, glass towers catching the morning sun, but something beneath it had shifted. You couldn't see it from the street, but you could feel it. Policies rewritten, systems recoded, power recalibrated. They called it the Grant Ripple. The ripple begins in boardrooms across America. Compliance officers whispered her name when drafting memos. At fintech startups, engineers rewrote code, removing risk indicators that were never about money in the first place. At one community bank in Ohio, a teller noticed a training module pop up with a new title. Bias Awareness in Transaction Verification. Required. Below it, in small gray text, developed in partnership with the Federal Equity Compliance Bureau. That bureau had one founder, the Human Stories in Atlanta. A barber hung a framed letter near his mirror, a formal apology from his bank. In Houston, a daycare owner reopened after her account was unfrozen. In Chicago, a college student who'd been flagged for unusual activity received an email saying her tuition transfer had been restored. Each letter carried a signature that wasn't corporate, but human. Alicia Grant, Director from Data to Dignity. The Bureau's headquarters hummed with quiet purpose. Every wall bore charts of progress, not profits, but people. 10,000 accounts restored, 320 million reimbursed. 0 bias discrepancies across 8 federal audits. Alicia stood in front of those numbers during a staff meeting, hands clasped behind her back. Every one of these digits, she said, was once a person made to feel small. Our job is to make sure they never feel that way again. Her team applauded softly, the kind of applause that carries respect, not noise. The classroom moment at Georgetown Law. A visiting professor clicked play on a video titled, The Grant Case, Redefining Financial Justice. Law students leaned forward as footage of Alicia's testimony appeared on screen. Justice isn't revenge, her voice echoed. It's recognition. A student raised her hand. How did she stay that calm? The professor smiled. Because calm is power when the truth is already on your side. The reversal complete. Meanwhile, Bank 241's former building was being remodeled into something new, the Center for Financial Ethics and Accountability. On opening day, a bronze plaque was unveiled at the entrance. It read, Here once stood a bank that forgot what fairness meant. Here now stands a lesson in what happens when someone remembers. And below that, in smaller letters, dedicated to Alicia Grant, whose courage turned evidence into equity. The private piece back home, Alicia lived simply. No press appearances, no interviews. She watered her plants, answered emails, and every morning read one handwritten letter from the stack that kept arriving from strangers. One was from a woman in Detroit. They called me suspicious. You made me visible again. Another from a retired teacher. When they froze my pension, I thought it was over. You reminded me the system still has people in it. She kept them in a wooden box labeled gratitude, not trophies. An unexpected visit one rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled outside her office window, an assistant knocked. "Director Grant, someone's here to see you." She looked up and froze. Standing in the doorway was Linda Morse, no longer in designer suits, but in a modest gray dress. She held a binder close to her chest. "I thought you'd want to see this," Linda said quietly. Alicia opened the binder. Inside were blueprints for a new training model, one built not on risk metrics, but human behavior research. At the top, it read, "The Grant Compliance Framework." Linda's eyes glistened. "They asked me to lead implementation." "I wanted your blessing," Alicia smiled faintly. "You don't need my blessing, Linda. You already earned your redemption." For the first time in years, both women exhaled. Two sides of a broken system now working to fix it. The legacy by year's end, the Grant effect reached beyond banking. Airlines, insurance firms, even tech companies began adopting her oversight model. One CEO publicly admitted, "We didn't realize how much discrimination costs until she showed us the invoice." Universities renamed scholarships after her. Policymakers cited her case as the benchmark for ethical AI design, but Alicia stayed out of the spotlight. When asked for a statement, she sent back one line: "Fairness should function, not perform." Full circle exactly 1 year to the day after her account had been frozen, Alicia returned to that same bank building, now the Ethics Center. The air smelled of new paint and purpose. A group of interns stood by the entrance, reading the plaque aloud. One of them looked up and whispered, "That's her." Alicia smiled and kept walking. She wasn't there to be recognized. She was there to remember. The closing speech that evening, she spoke at a private community event. No cameras, no scripts, just her voice, soft but certain. "When I was humiliated that morning, I thought the moment defined me," she said. But it didn't. It revealed the system. And when a system is revealed, we have a choice. Rebuild it, or let it rot. She looked around the small crowd. Teachers, janitors, students, mechanics, people who'd lived through quiet injustices too. "Rebuilding doesn't start with power," she continued. "It starts with principle. It starts when you decide that dignity doesn't need permission slips." The room was silent, but not empty. It was full of something better. Belief. The closing image later that night, Alicia stood by the river, watching city lights ripple on the water. Her reflection blended with the skyline. One person, one story, shaping something larger. She whispered to herself, "It started with one freeze, and it ended with movement." The wind carried her words away like they belonged to everyone. Final words. Values-based CTA. Before we go any further, wherever you're watching this, pause for a second. Ask yourself, what would you do if power tested your dignity in public? Would you stay silent, or would you stand the way Alicia did, calm, steady, unshakable? Because justice doesn't always show up in courtrooms. Sometimes it walks into a bank with a badge and a heart full of truth. Share this story if you believe dignity should never need permission. Because one voice, calm, certain, factual, can still change everything.